exactly is a high risk population? So children or parents, we call them beneficiaries who belong from extremely vulnerable or minority communities or marginalized communities where
Right,
the system has failed them. The institutions around them who are supposed to protect them have
right,
failed them,
right,
in a very systematic way. I mean, a child of a sex worker is systematically, you can say that the kind of rights he needs to have or the kind of life he needs, there's no institutional reformative lens in the ecosystem to provide protect their rights or maybe put attention to their needs, be it educational or emotional also.
correct.
So they continue to be marginalized since the very beginning, since the day they are
Right,
born. So we started, I mean, we also understanding the ecosystem, we felt that this kind of population, it could be juvenile home, observational homes, reprimand homes. It could be your Hijra community, right? Again, systematically marginalized since the very, very beginning, right? Or
right.
sex worker community. So these are spaces which are high risk spaces.
Hey guys, you caught us live while we were in on a personal conversation, but nonetheless, thank you so much. Sorry for the delay. We had some internet connectivities. Thank you for joining us on another interview of Dialogues That Matter, an initiative by Dialogue Space, where we speak to change makers who are doing stellar work in their own field. We have someone really special with us today. We have Juhi Sharma, who is from Light Up and Unbottle Emotions. And we have a lot of questions that we want to ask her. I will do a quick introduction and then we'll get into the topic of today's conversation. Juhi Sharma is the founder and CEO of Light Up Emotions Matter Foundation. It's one of the first few social ventures that is advocating the need to practice emotional intelligence in the form of social emotional learning workshops for the underserved population, focusing on developing their social and emotional competencies. They basically engage deeply in issues related to gender development, education, human rights. And Juhi herself has explored and established these connections between social emotional learning through interventions and positive emotional well-being. And to her credit, she has a lot of things that she has done. Like I said, she's a Stanford graduate from the School of Business. She's also a Sahapedia UNESCO fellow. She's been a TEDx Pune speaker, and the list is just on and on. You guys should look her up. But getting to today's conversation, and the topic for today is ethical considerations while working in high risk areas, and that's something that Juhi has been privy to and has a lot of experience in that area. Thank you for joining us today, Juhi, and thank you for giving us your time. I'd like to get right to it and perhaps try and understand what the topic means and what do you mean when when we say high risk areas. Could you break it down for us?
Sure. Thank you, Shruti, for the wonderful, beautiful introduction. And I'm really, really excited to be here and, talking about the kind of work we do. So I'll also just start about that what exactly means high risk areas,
Right,
right?
right,
And I was saying, sharing, previously also that my first stint in the development sector or working with children was in a juvenile home, which was back in 2012.
right,
And I was studying something very, very different, and a 2-month project become an 8-month life transformational experience for me. And it was also the first time I figured out that okay, I'm deeply passionate about this and I really want to do something concrete for them, because I just didn't want it to move away from that experience and go back to my life and just back to the normalcy. I genuinely wanted to do something. So I think that first foundation experience made a huge difference and also motivates all of us in my organization to work for the high risk population. Now, what exactly is a high risk population? So, children or parents, we call them beneficiaries who belong from extremely vulnerable or minority communities or marginalized communities where
right,
the system has failed them. The institutions around them who are supposed to protect them have
right,
failed them,
right,
in a very systematic way. I mean, a child of a sex worker is systematically, you can say that the kind of rights he needs to have or the kind of life he needs. There's no institutional reformative lens in the ecosystem to provide protect their rights or maybe put attention to their needs, be it educational or emotional also.
Correct.
So they continue to be marginalized since the very beginning, since the day they are
Right.
born. So we started, we also understanding the ecosystem, we felt that this kind of population, it could be juvenile home, observational homes, reprimand homes. It could be your Hijra community, right? Again, systematically marginalized since the very, very beginning, right? Or
Right.
sex worker community. So these are spaces which are high risk spaces. Now, why
Right.
is it important to have ethical boundaries and considerations? I'll tell you what I've realized. I am 31 years old. Okay, and my first experience possibly happened in 2012, right? So 8 years back, I was about 23, 24, 22 years old, right? And I've seen this in the young population now. It becomes like an adrenaline kick to work in high risk spaces. You are also very passionate. You want to create a change as a young change maker, but I also personally feel there's a time and age and a maturity level which is required to work in such spaces. It shouldn't stop you, right, to go ahead and work, but you also have to take care of the nature of the contribution that you're doing. Are you promising way too much because it's difficult to implement that on ground,
Right.
right? Or what kind of scenario that you're painting? Because what my experience has taught me is that the volunteer work with great intention that people try and achieve, it's also become very skewed as an ecosystem. It
Right.
used to be very different when I started. It's become such a CV building exercise now,
Mm.
because we need to go to a foreign university. But they continue to be in the same marginalized communities, not getting access to opportunities and everything. So that is why it was very, very important for us also to establish that, because we work with a lot of young adults. Like, you talk about the young age category, I have it each and every age category in my team. And
Right.
it becomes my responsibility to pass on what I learned from my mentors, and to create that kind of culture within the ecosystem also. I'm not saying that we don't make mistakes. It's a learning curve, because now there's so much information, there's so much narrative, even on social media. It's very difficult for anybody to navigate that. So
Mm.
that is why we thought, okay, it's very, very important to draw these boundaries for our own well-being also. There's so many students who are not even in that mental health capacity to come and contribute to a space like that. So it's okay to help maybe a little and not create that large or long-term damage for them,
Right.
right? When working in the, and you have to be ready, you have to be equipped to work in such a space, is what I've learned. I always wanted to work and create some change in the sex worker community. I decided to get into that community after 3 years of establishing my own organization, because I felt, okay, we are ready.
Right.
We can create a long term change
Right.
for maybe 5 children, but yeah. So, that is
Right.
why high risk and ethical considerations come into picture.
Right. I think that puts a lot of things into perspective, and I think something that we don't think about when you think about helping people who do require some help or guidance, right? I think that's a very valid point and something that we need to put our heads towards and kind of think. I then come to my next question, which is to understand from what your organization does. I think you guys kind of put a lot of weight on emotional intelligence and how you develop that through social emotional learning workshops, and then of course I'm sure you have a lot of things in place to kind of facilitate that, right? How does that become important to kind of nurture their growth, and why particularly that is something that you guys are focusing on, is something I'd like to understand.
Okay. So I think most of the change makers, there's some of it is also born out of our own experience,
Right.
and then you want to come up and, like, what I feel social emotion, like social entrepreneurship is all about, how I think is it's about bringing solutions to social problems,
Right.
right? So when I started working, the kind of social issues that used to be prevalent was school dropout rates were very high, which are fairly a little more balanced now, right?
Right.
Level of bullying was high then, is high now. you
Right.
know. Teachers not being fully equipped was high then, is high now. So
Right.
some of the problems still continue to be present.
Right.
Now when you talk about, because my first experience was in a high risk, in the most vulnerable marginalized population, because they were street children of the streets, they didn't have parents.
Right.
So I feel there's no window for them to communicate about their feelings. It was as basic as that. I mean, of course I got into research and I figured out everything later on, because I was also very, very young, and social emotional learning, people are now aware about it. I
Right.
mean, I'm not saying, like, for me, it came to me like 8 years back, and I've been at it and figuring it out, right?
Right.
So I felt that one school counselor, even the current ratio right now, so they are about 1,500 students, and you have one school counselor in government schools. That ratio doesn't work.
Correct.
It will not work in a private ecosystem also.
Right.
And children now, the kind of complications and the kind of competitiveness and the rat race that we are part of, especially I belong to Delhi, it's insane, and it's unfair. So it's very, very important for children to be equipped with those social emotional skills to
Right.
navigate their lives, right?
Right.
Even if they're sad, it's okay to be sad, right? And not feel like, okay, I'm what's gone wrong into me, or small things. If somebody is bullying them, go ask for help.
Right.
Very, very small thing, right? Or if anybody is body shaming you, don't let that become your identity, right?
Right.
And I mean, there's such difficult experience. These are some very basic ones, right? Then there is abuse, then there is boys get abused, right? There's massive bullying that happens. So there's so many challenges. And a place like Delhi is overexposed in
Right.
general, be it government or be it high risk. Everything's extremely high level because
Right.
of the nature of the city that we live in. So it was very, very important, like, to incorporate this in a very systematic way, right?
Right.
So we as an organization customize these promotive and preventive SEL programs for schools. So when we talk about schools, our lens has always been 360-degree. So we train teachers, we sensitize parents, and we've built SEL curriculums for it to be integrated systematically in the entire school ecosystem, right?
Right.
Then in high risk areas, what our learning curve has shown, if my team of 5 or 10 or 15 people will also go and try to change the ecosystem of a high risk area which has been damaged systematically since decades,
Yeah.
it's not possible. But you
Yeah.
can create a nice future of, window of future, a nice possible little bit of hopeful future for the children to break that intergenerational cycle,
Right.
right? So we've bonded, we've built some relationships with some of the children from different high risk spaces. So we've also brought them in where we are looking at SEL and livelihood also. So how do you break that intergenerational cycle of poverty also? You
Correct.
give them livelihood, you give them dignity, you give them those skill sets that helps them heal, you know. So all of that.
Right.
And then we have SEL and art, which is a little bit of fun,
Right.
right? So we also work in an urban slum. That's where I also started,
Right.
and where we are using art as a medium to develop expression, to develop their voice, to be able to shape their identities in a more creative way, expressive way. So these are some of the programs that we do. So if
Right.
you come to me and you tell me, okay, Juhi, this is a community, in a rural India also, I would say, okay, give me 6 months, let me do assessment, let me visit, let me navigate the problems, and we'll possibly create a nice SEL intervention for that rural space,
Right.
which can create change. So
Right.
couple of things which are common are like our curriculum, facilitation style, our 360-degree approach, and we are now learning to build those, streamlining those curriculums, SEL
Right.
curriculums that would deem fit for any community, but it has to be customized. So
Right.
this can't be your CA, CBSC math syllabus.
Correct.
It
Correct. Of course.
has to be customized.
Right.
So your 60s and 20% can still be permanent, but I personally feel it has to be customized. So this is what we do.
Right. I think also what we cannot discount when we speak about the marginalized societies per se or high risk areas is the vulnerabilities that they go through, right? And that kind of puts them and impacts their psychological and mental health in general, right? Their psychological development or just their mental health. which also becomes something that you need to combat through the things that you do. Could you perhaps share a few experiences of how it could perhaps impact their mental health or just their development in general?
I mean, it's very very heartbreaking, even to share what they kind of go through. Like some of them even don't get the basic nutrition, so the growth is also stunted, right?
Right,
It also,
right,
you
right,
kind of developed, you're not, you don't grow, the development stage doesn't really happen in that way. And then,
right,
I mean, even like I've met children in the shelter homes, some of their parents are in Tihar jail. Some of the parents have
right,
been remarried and the child becomes a stepson, and the father abuses the mother and the
right,
son also, right? So, and the child
right,
is not even able to look me into the eyes. So, there's the self-esteem continues to get scratched, how do I
right,
even help him to cope with anger when systematically the background, the level of trauma is really really high, right? And
right,
then I mean, in the brothel space, it's really really it is a triggering the family, the way the idea of family is very different there. They've seen their
right,
mothers, with so many partners coming in, going, and not being with them in the most pleasant way, right? In
right,
such small quarters, such dingy spaces, no basic hygiene. So I've seen children, developing. I mean, I am not somebody who labels, but short attention span, it's very difficult to sit. Violence is very, very normalized. So even hitting
mm,
me with a block, Lego block, is absolutely normal. So I'm not saying that, hey, I'm your teacher and hey, respect me. I'm not somebody, I'm not a facilitator like that. But I'm just saying the idea of violence is very, very normalized. And since the time they've grown, so and instances of inappropriate touching and everything. So all of this creates a major, major impact on their mental
right,
health. So even if a child is going to go and try and navigate a normal life, say for example, one student continues education till 12th grade, that never really happens. But this child has completed, his her education till about 12th grade and is trying to find a job. Now, when they go and they ask that, hey, where are you from? He can't really go walk in comfortably and say that I'm a child of a sex worker who is into prostitution. The kind of judgment, identity, and it keeps coming back. So it does take a huge, huge, massive toll. And children, some of the children also, develop clinical issues. So we are trying to work in the preventive and preparing them for the real life, that okay,
right,
this might happen and how they can become okay. And of course there are going to be downers, there are going to be breakdowns, but how to get up and not, I mean, not go down means not like down. They have to move up.
correct,
So it's like we make them move from window of tolerance to window of resilience. So we
right,
navigate that channel for them.
right,
So, especially children from the high risk, we are now looking at working with few children, but in a very holistic way, a year-long program. So, therapy is a part of it, SEL is a part of it, how to manage finances are part of it, livelihood training skills are a part of it. So, trying to make it watertight because it's very intertwined, and COVID was the biggest realization for me, because it was so difficult to put food on the table,
right,
right? Yeah. So I mean, there are many many challenges, not just one.
yeah,
Like I said, the cycle is, it keeps coming back. It's very
yeah,
difficult to break it,
yeah,
but one has to try again and again and look at from a very long term impact, not like, hey, let's do 5 workshops and move on. It
right,
doesn't work like that. You have to
right,
build, I mean, it's taken us 1 year plus to build decent relationships with them.
right,
It was so difficult to gain their trust, and we're still building that. We're on it,
right, right,
right? So
right,
it's tough, and like I said, they've had such bad experience, it's difficult for them also to trust. I don't blame them, but
right.
it's okay, we are also at it.
Yeah, yeah. I think what you did bring up is that their world, their worldview, and everything is just so different to kind of get into that and then explain things to them, break it down, and then enable that trust and then facilitate them towards development and growth, it definitely seems like a challenge. And it seems like a task that requires a team and constant effort, like you're saying, right? So definitely sounds like a lot. What I did want to ask though is, especially with children, right? I'm curious to know, what is the concept of gender like with these kids, especially with the way they process their emotions? And could you elaborate? It needn't be just kids, but also just in the marginalized sector or in the high risk areas. How do they process gender? You might not have an answer to it, but maybe if you could.
Yeah, because gender, I think, has been one of the most significant learnings for me. And I've realized gender is so vast.
Right,
You know, gender as a subject is huge, it is massive. What I have personally seen, how they perceive, I mean, I get it if you're asking me about their own identity or gender. So, it's very, very, there's no exploration as such,
right,
you know. And thanks to Bollywood, they've done a really bad job and enforcing the kind of gender stereotypes that have been created, and it's so difficult to break them, you know.
right,
I mean, in metropolitan cities like Delhi and Bombay, you know, where there's just so much dominance of Bollywood. We really have, I mean, there's just so much backtrack that happens, you know, and you have to go back again and
right,
work on it. And there's just so much influence on the young children and adults. And I would sit like, hello, what to do?
right,
Right? So there are very, very few instances where you would find a child open to exploring that. I don't think so. There's a lot of information, especially
right,
in these communities. Very,
right,
very few organizations might also be working in these spaces, right? I'm not an expert as such,
right,
but there's very little information. Now, one is that exploring oneself. Second is your
right,
sex education. That also
right,
falls under, you know,
then,
gender.
right, right,
That also is very, very difficult. Again,
right,
a very
right,
systematic year on year, month by month kind of work is required because they explore. And in a
right,
place like in juvenile homes, abuse is very, very normal. It might not come across, even if you read papers, and more so in boys' juvenile homes. It's
right,
massive, it's rampant, right?
hmm,
Even in
hmm,
jails, it is, right? It now we have started seeing in web series, but it's been there for years, right?
right,
So then your sex worker community, again, the kind of boundaries and understanding that the child, I mean, we have to tone them down so much. And even like, and I'll tell you, we've done workshops to prevent, you know, cases of inappropriate touching. Children forget. Children forget like this. And it's not like they're doing it because they want to do it or they want to ignore the conversation. There has to be so much, you know, reformation of the same information that you have to go back and do it again and again and again and again until and
right,
until it stops. So these are again very, very complex things. Now,
correct,
third thing I would want to talk about is gender-based violence, which is largely upon women, right? So they've also grown up. So making them appropriate role models, or to break that cycle of that, okay, they've grown up in an abusive household, because a child is also seeing the father doing it, it will also be continued. So it's very difficult to break that also,
right,
right? So these are the three boxes that have kind of come to my notice. All are three, all of them are extremely difficult.
because,
I
yeah,
just feel long-term interventions can help, and a systematic approach to it, right? So when I say
right,
systematic, you take care of almost all the stakeholders. If not all, get organizations who can help you. So you're looking at
right,
domestic violence, you can't really function without a counselor or legal help, right?
right,
There's no point getting the mother out of that household and not work, look at the livelihood opportunity for future, you know, for her, or to empower her. Counseling is so important. Then there's a legal protocol also. So I
right,
just feel every intervention has to be seen from a very 360-degree approach. And if you are not able to do everything, collaborate with partners. I mean, we are also learning,
right,
and it might look difficult, but start with small micro, you know, boxes of people or groups of people. You can't really
right,
go and do this work for 50,000 women at one go. It's impossible, right?
right,
So it's slow change, slow movement, But a 360 approach, long term interventions can help you break that cycle. And one has to be really patient when working
Right.
in these places. So if
Right.
you think, oh, magic, child will go and he will be on the stage or she will be on the stage and giving this speech, and we will have this impact, very difficult.
Right. Right. I'm sure. I'm sure the experience does sound testing for you as well, as an individual, as a team, to be there and continue to do your work. Right. And it does sound challenging, but then I'm sure there are also times when these kids surprise you. What is that like? I'm sure there are some instances or something like that.
I mean, yeah, I always tell, people find our work very triggering. The stories that I share are very triggering. There has been a point when my friends would also come and tell me, okay, we think it's taking a toll on you.
Mm.
So I think you are passionate. Why don't you do 25% of work in high risk and, go back to normal school community projects, which are more fun, and, it's like a de-stressor. You go there and you just absorb. So yes, it
Mm.
is challenging. But then, like you said, that those positive stories, those hopeful stories, like I said, from window of tolerance to window of resilience, then comes a window of hope, right? So there have been instances. I mean, I've seen children completely, like, they have shown so much resistance towards us in the beginning, not having trust, testing us at every point in time, to now that they can comfortably have their breakdown with me over a call also. Now this sounds very intangible, okay?
Mm.
This
Mm.
doesn't make that, okay, hey, this ex child is going on stage and talking in English, and that's the picture of impact that we all have, right? Or getting that job. But in a space like this, even like that person considering me enough, like I keep myself at a very low pedestal here. I put all focus on them, right? So they feeling comfortable to give me a call and ask for help. They giving me a call and sharing their problems. They giving me a call and talking about opportunities. Okay, let's sit, let's map what can we do in future. This is huge movement for me, right? We've moved children also from sex worker community space to a different location. Initially we supported, now I see that child fighting to survive, to fill their rent, to
Right.
because after a point I couldn't, and that's not my work. And I'm seeing him at 8 working like how to me, and not giving up and not going back to that life. So he gave me his word and he stuck by it. Now that's also a hopeful achievement for me. And like I said, like I have accepted that it's a very patient, long road, and it will take time, but we will make sure that children reach their destination in the coming years.
Right. Right. I think to that effect, what you did mention, right, using art and different forms of it to kind of enable this. How has that helped, and what kind of art do you use in your workshops?
So we wanted to create a space where young organizations could come and contribute. I genuinely believe in collaboration. I feel that I don't have the all the skill sets to create this change. Also, I'm not perfect. I don't know everything under the sun, right? About the work I'm doing. I'm a constant learner. So we collaborate with young individuals, passionate students who want to work hard, create change. So we have theater, we have violin classes, we have music, we have storytelling for early, childhood category, the kindy students,
Right.
bringing in values and all of that. And these, and we have dance, of course. They really forced me to get dance in the community. They were like, hello, how come dance is missing? Children were after my life.
Right.
So due to COVID, it's got like, there's a stop that has happened, but we are revamping it. We are making it more compact, and we are making it more, outcome oriented. Like earlier it was like, okay, go have fun, learn and everything. Now we are making it very structured. We are bringing an element of expressive arts, and making it very stage oriented, because every child, I mean, who doesn't mind a round of applause, when
Right.
they're on stage? We all wanted that when we were in school also, you
Right.
know nobody would be upset, oh my god, this person is appreciating me and clapping for me. Everybody would smile, and there's a shift in self-esteem, there's a shift in confidence, there's a shift in wanting to go ahead and revisit that whole team building experiences or teamwork for that matter. So there are a lot of soft skills that happen. And I'll tell you this instance. This one little girl, she had speech clarity issues. So if she's talking, you won't be able to understand, and very confident and loves dancing and everything. But if you tell her, okay, come on stage, very friendly, but she will have that fear that, okay, I can't be on stage and everything. And I couldn't believe rapping just brought so much clarity in her speech,
Mm.
right? And now you hear her rapping, and my mind like blows. And I was the first one to notice that, because the team that was working, they were not aware about that speech clarity issue. And I was like, I'm not even a doctor to diagnose that, but I could see that it was there. Her
Right.
speech clarity was not there. And then that video is still there, and I get very stunned. So there I saw the potential of power. I've seen like theater has really reformed them. I mean, we have a beneficiary, like student from our community giving workshops, theater workshops in LSR,
Right.
Lady Shriram College, Delhi, right? So, I mean, art, I think, is very, very powerful. And urban slum as a community is a very difficult space. There's no
Yeah.
infrastructure, there's no classroom. So it's an open space, there's no consistency. I mean, it's a slum of 500 people, right? So art actually could beautifully set in. And in future, we want to open a center when we are able to survive through this funding nonsense. So someday we'll open a nice
Right.
center for them, and again bring in a livelihood option. People from the community can come, women from the community can come and work in
Right.
sustainable project. So but that's something we thought, okay, let's work when we are not going on ground much, right? So we are working on that plan. But I think art will always be a very strong part in our community interventions, because even the mediums that we use, they're all alternative education mediums. There's
Right.
no academic teaching of teaching emotions or skills. So we
Right.
use hula hoop, we use Lego, we use colors, we use nice mindful meditations where they draw colors, they paint in the sky, all in their imagination, right? So no academics here, only
Mm.
fun and play and art. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Sounds like the right approach to have, especially for kids who might not have as many opportunities as us, for that matter of fact, right? It just enables them, and with that opportunity, of course, like you said, there is fun. I'm sure it's more than just fun, right? It's also
Yeah.
a mix of learning, and again furthering that growth. I want to come back to the point that you mentioned in the very beginning about the team and the volunteers, and how sometimes people just come out to work because they want to tick off their boxes or just CSR activity kind of a thing. Could you elaborate a little on that, and also talk to us a little about the any precautions or advice that you might have to volunteers, that you might have for volunteers who plan to work with such areas or are working in such areas?
Yeah, I think I personally feel a lot about this, because while working on the ground, and I'm not, no organization is perfect, to be very honest, right? And then I've developed that lens, okay, that to see problems in other organizations or how people are kind of navigating, for that matter, my own team. I try to see it from a lighter lens, because I always feel there's scope of improvement. People are not doing it intentionally, they're not aware about it, or nobody taught you about it. We never had like a sensitization session in our school. Hey, these are the things you need to take care when you're volunteering. So I
Yeah.
feel these narratives are evolving, and all of us have to be a little open to change. So even if anybody comes up to me in my team and they tell me that, okay, Jui, why don't you include this and see it from this lens, I am open to it. So whatever I'm going to say is also from that lens, that people need to be open to change and open to evolve and build that narrative along the way, right? So some of the experience have been very, very disappointing for me. So when you work in a high risk space, never look at a timeline as small as 2 weeks or 2 months. Minimum, give it a year.
Yeah.
Because NGOs, and then there are children, and there are plethora of volunteers who come in and come go. So it becomes very, very difficult for them to trust anybody, because they've been disappointed before, they'll continue to get disappointed, and it's very, very rare that that chance of, one child getting that opportunity and making it in life is also very low and less in this country. It's not very high. It's not like your top school, or it's a slum, it's a marginalized community, right? So very important to make sure that you commit. If you commit, you commit for a minimum a year, so that you are also able to build something, and it's a very rewarding experience, right? Secondly, your life and their life are poles apart. So whatever examples or whatever you're sharing about your life, even authentically for that matter, make sure that you're not painting a very
Yeah.
unreal picture for them,
Yeah.
right? So it's very, very important. If you're talking about your holiday, it can't be Italy or Germany, you know. It could be, hey, let me talk about Qutub Minar in Delhi. It could be a local spot in Bangalore. It could be Gateway of India in Bombay. So making sure that you don't, enlarge that divide gap, because we being privileged is also not our fault. At the end of the day, we are also wired, but it's very important when you're working, the center, the focus has to be them, right? What you're gaining, which is great, right? There's nothing wrong in it. You do it for the certificate, but do take care of some of these things, right? Never paint a picture or commit to promises which you can't fulfill. You can always say that, let me come back to you, let me see what can I do. Don't paint a false picture. Oh, I'll do
Right.
this for you, I'll fix this for you, I'll do this. It's difficult when it comes to implementation,
Right.
right?
Right.
So these are some of the points which I feel. And fourth, I would say definitely, what mental health space are you in, right? What if you go and you get triggered about your own trauma that you experienced in your childhood? Because to be very honest, Shruti, we can't really say that, hey, abuse cases happen more in a village and not in a different household, because it happens everywhere. It happens to all genders,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we can't really play the privilege card there. It's as horrifying for any individual, for that matter, from any gender,
Yeah.
right? So not to play that, you have to see, do you have that mental capacity, do you have that maturity or the mental bandwidth to go walk in a place? Because see, your body, your mind will absorb that, right? And a little bit of balance is required. So you don't have to work for 6 days, 5 days. I would say, if anybody is passionate about working, don't go for the story, don't go for the adrenaline rush. Make sure that your intention is in the right place, because they are not stories, they are humans. I mean, of course they have their own stories, but at the end they've been through way too much. And I've seen people exploiting them for their story. I mean, I've not posted them about, not a single picture. I don't post anything. I talk about my experiences, yes, but I take their consent. I make sure if they are okay, if they would be okay about sharing themselves. So we are
Right.
working, we have to go that minute,
Yeah.
in details. And this is, we are developing our own process. I'm not saying that we've learned it from somewhere. We just focus, what if the children feel bad? Should we ask this? Are they comfortable? So we, do a lot of back and forth there, and that's how we are able to develop it. And that's why I feel like it's important to do it. Like, I used to get very angry. People would say, ping me, can you take me to, the red light area, or you can take me to the juvenile home? And I was like, hello, it's not a zoo.
Right.
Right? Yeah, I mean, these are not like, I went to the first time I went to the brothel was after 3 or 4 months, when I had some sense of connection, and I, because it's their home, and I'm nobody to just barge in. Media professionals, volunteers, they will go, they will scratch, they will ask question, how are you here, what happened? I've still late not asked that. They
Yeah.
themselves tell me, right? Or my team members. And it's a like a, that's how you build relationships. Because I'm not going with a pen and a paper and I'm asking, how did you landed up, where, how come you're here, what happened? I mean, they have 3 children, 3 of them have different fathers. That was a completely mind-boggling dynamic for me to hear. I stayed mum. I was like, okay, it's okay,
Yeah.
right? So small nuances are very, very important. And again, like I said, attach yourself to small numbers, because it's very difficult to take care of a large number, this is a space I wouldn't appreciate people scaling. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
So this is not the space where you can scale. More players can come and contribute to drive that change, but very difficult space to scale. And these are some of the things people should be mindful of. And like, again, I'm not saying from an expert lens, I'm not saying from a moral compass. I'm just saying from a very humanistic lens. I'm saying it from our experiences. I'm saying it from a child's lens. What makes them feel nice, feels bad, or disappointed from us. And I don't want them to, get disappointed from us, because we could be a potential lead for them to lead a better life, you know.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important that we move away from, and people, really do this God worshipping. If people, like individuals, change makers, if they're working in a very high, it's great, you appreciate, you help, but unnecessary God worshipping is not, I don't think so, it's worthwhile. Let us make that change also, no? I mean, the focus should be on them, a little bit less on us. So yeah.
Okay, we lost you there, but yeah, we lost you there. You were talking about the children.
Yeah, so I was saying that I see sometimes, like I've seen these high risk spaces, the stories make it way, way more like, okay, this X organization is doing this. You Google how many children of the sex workers have made it in life. You will find 1 or 2 articles only. So I want that number to change.
Right, right. I
I want more children to be role models in representing their own community.
right.
So because I can only be a mentor, I can't be a role model. I come from a very different background, and I think COVID also made me realized a lot about that, because we were deeply involved in COVID relief work. I mean, I was at my home eating food, right? And there were days I didn't feel like, because people were struggling so much to get food, or milk for their children.
Yeah.
So I realized, okay, we can't be role models. You
Mm.
need to empower them in a way that they can fight for their own rights, and they cannot let anybody fool them, be it
Yeah.
the government, be it the institution, or be it NGOs for that matter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think a lot to think about there, and the underlying thing that's kind of coming through is that at the end of the day, we're all humans, and to be mindful of their feelings, where they're coming from, and try and not uh, kind of largen the gap or increase the gap between the
Yeah.
two. I think that is
Yeah.
something that we need to keep in mind. I think we're almost towards the end. I'm going to check if we have any questions that are coming in. Meanwhile, I think something really interesting, Juhi, the title or the name of your organization, both the names, Light It Up and Unbottle, very interesting names. I'm sure there's a story down there. Would you like to share that with us? And of course, what lies ahead for the and of course also what lies ahead for the organizations, like you mentioned, centers, which I hope you do succeed and are able to kind of manifest. But what are the other things that kind of lie ahead for the two organizations?
Okay. So nobody has asked me, that how come you arrived. I mean, everybody has asked me in person that how come you thought of this name.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So my sister named it Light Up, from the
Okay.
metaphor of that, there's always light at the end of the road or the tunnel, and whenever any door closes in life, every day is a new day. And if we want to, we can allow some light to come in our lives, right?
Right.
So Light Up was born from then. And I always, it's so easy, Shruti, for me to translate this to people who come from any income background or any language they speak. I remember I was in Paikropeta in Andhra Pradesh, a 4 kilometer village, and I was in an institutional home. And I had to do this session with the parents, and the parents were people who sell fruits on the railway station. So that kind of community background. And I walked in and I said that, and I'm going to say it in Hindi and I'll translate it in English, that हम लोगों के जीवन में रोशनी लाने का काम करते हैं. So we work towards bringing in some light into your lives. In every time people smile just the way you did,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So any language, any background, you put me anywhere and we communicate this, it brings that smile, it brings that little hope, and hope is the thing which will only keep us, go. I mean, we will have our share of downs and then we would learn and we would like to, everybody wants to just fight that back, right?
Yeah.
So that's how Light Up came into picture. We were planning to launch our school program last year. Thanks to COVID, didn't happen.
Right.
And we revamped our high risk project, and we've come up with Project Phoenix. That first class is starting tomorrow, and
Oh, okay.
we've identified 15 students. So some of them are children of the sex workers, some of them are from aftercare home, some of them are from urban slums, and these are young adults where we'll be training them. They are going to be with us for the next 3 years. They've been with us for 2 years or more. And we are looking at livelihood, SEL, financial literacy, digital literacy, therapy, and just like I said, make them reach a destination. So that started, and we are just busy, bringing the program together. So first, one aspect is starting, their English and confidence classes are starting. And then we are revamping the art project, which will go on, I think. On ground programs might start from July onwards, because I think schools will resume there. So, I mean, that's what lies ahead. And we're exploring radio, we are exploring um, radio opportunities for SEL content to go. And let's see what else is in store for Lighter. Yeah.
Sounds
Unbottle
great.
is a different initiative.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I think, like I said, I work with a lot of youth, and I think I've been able to, like, there's a click and a connection that has happened, and I'm not very very old, but there's a a considerable amount of gap that I have. And I don't see my fellow mates struggling so much with mental health as much as I see them. It is also because of how the education system is, or the current political scenario, or what as a country we are going through. It really impacts. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
can. You were
Yeah.
telling you weren't that old. Yes.
Yeah. So I saw a lot of young students struggling with their mental health and well-being. So Light Up, we always wanted to focus on, the children from the underserved population. So One Bottle focuses on creating workshops, educational programs, free resources and content for from a mental health lens. So Lighter focuses on social emotional learning largely, and Unbottle comes up with really interesting intersectional from an intersectional lens. We're trying to create that narrative.
I think I lost you again. Hello.
Yeah, but my internet seems fine. Hello. Hello, can you hear me now? You can hear me now.
Yes. Yes, I can. You were
Yeah.
talking to us about Unbottle. Quickly, if you perhaps want to run us through that.
Yeah, I was saying that since I've worked with so many young adults, so we wanted the focus to be on children from the underserved communities on under Light
Right.
Up. So
Right.
we thought of, and we started being associated as a safe space.
Right.
We were used to started doing workshops in colleges also, because I think mental health is generally we are sitting at a time bomb,
Right.
and Delhi is complex, in general.
Right. Right.
So it's not the most, it's a happening place for all the wrong reasons,
Mm.
right? So children need that kind of support, that kind of access, because it's also kind of very expensive. So we have some programs which are free resources, which are some programs which are very, very nominal. So we've built that community at Unbottle, and we are planning to launch another initiative, but I'm going to be mum about it.
Right.
Once we are ready, we'll be doing that, but more towards parents and teachers.
Sure. I think sounds like that could be a conversation for another day with what you do at Unbottle. We'd love to have that conversation as well. Unfortunately, this conversation has to come to an end
Yeah.
here today. I think everybody's just stunned and were kind of engrossed in what you were having to say. We don't have any questions as such. I have one last question though. What were your learnings from 2020? It was a really tough year, and of course, testing and trying times. What was your learning from 2020, and what are you optimistic about in the future in general?
I think my biggest learning in 2020 was that how much we could push ourselves, you
Mm,
know.
mm,
And I think for me, my team, I think I always have associated being resilient. I think my team also has learned to be resilient now. I
right,
see my children also moving in that direction, you know. So I think how far or how much more stretch, that stretch that we've been able to do and
right,
survive and been okay, and the kind of endurance our bodies, our mind have taken,
right,
I think in 2020. And I'm just very, very grateful that all my immediate team members and everybody, their families are all fine. And
right,
I'm genuinely, I am for that man, my family also. But
right,
it's become like this one unit for my children and my community people also. I think COVID didn't happen only there. There's zero social distancing there.
right,
So it's a different world that has been created. And I've been very paranoid about COVID in general.
right,
Yeah. So that what optimistic lens, I think I'm very, very hopeful, and I really want. Light Up also struggled a lot in terms of implementing the programs on ground. We navigated a lot online. We were able to do projects in Assam. We are exploring, radio. So it opened up a lot of different kind of lenses for us.
right.
So I'm looking forward to going back and implementing the programs we couldn't do in 2020. And I'm very, very hopeful because that's the vision that I have for Light Up. Like Unbottled did fairly well, but it's time. And Light Up, largely some of our months were just, we were busy in relief work,
Right.
so a lot of time went in there. So we've been reworking and re-strategizing, and it's given us a window to, sit back and, improvise the programs. But I think 2021 is the year of implementation. So I'm
I think
optimistic about that.
yes, I think that sounds quite right. 2021 could be the year of implementation, and we wish you luck and we hope you do
Thank
succeed
you.
in all your endeavors. And we'd love to have another conversation with you, maybe a few months or years down the line. And thank you so much, Juhi, for your time,
You're
for
welcome.
letting
And
us
I'm
speak.
so sorry about this sloppy internet connection. But yeah,
No
I had a
issues.
great time too.
Uh, no issues. Completely understand. It's just tough that we're relying on internet and so much of technology in these times. Also scary,
Yeah.
but it is what it is. But thank you once again, Juhi. Thank you for all the things that you have and
You're most
you have lit up our lives with the information that you gave, and just of course your presence and the things that you spoke. So thank you so much. We really enjoyed this conversation.
You're most welcome, and I wish all of you a very happy new year. And I hope you continue and to create and have this kind of conversations and dialogues and bring in different perspective and lenses and open that thinking capacity of people. So yeah,
Right.
thank you so
I think
much.
amen to that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, Juhi. Bye, everyone. We
Thank
will
you.
see you next
Bye
Friday with
bye.
another interview with another topic in another interesting person, story, conversation. Uh, we look forward to it. You can keep tabs, and we will see you guys next Friday. See you guys.